Episode 55 of the Fired Coaches podcast. Kind of a unique guest tonight in Neil Stratton, who started Inside the League back in 2002. I've been following his newsletter for the past 4 or 5 years. Really great information on everything football, everything scouting, agents, things leading up to the draft, stories of drafts past, insights, books he's written, GM backgrounds, scout stories, guys who are out of the profession and what they're missing. There's just so many cool things that I think people who enjoy the draft and scouting really would take an interest to. But Neil, sincerely appreciate you taking the time. We had a little bit of a glitchy issue here as we get started, so thanks for being patient and joining tonight.
My pleasure, Marcus. It's technology is not usually my friend. I'm used to the glitches, but it's great to be here and love the podcast and love the idea of it because it's about kind of the game behind the game, and that's what I'm all about as well.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's been fun, and obviously, again, I didn't even mention in the intro there, you got a podcast yourself too, obviously a YouTube page, which we'll get into here in a second. Scaling things back, I think you grew up, according to your website, it said you grew up in West Virginia and started Lone Star Football back in 1997. I guess from growing up to 1997, starting Lone Star Football, which was a draft publication. What kind of prompted you to go, this route with following, at that time, right? I mean, we're talking like dial-up internet, even maybe pre-internet kind of things. Like what drove you down the path to kind of go this direction?
Well, I always love the draft. I think a lot of people do, and especially like in the late '90s, maybe the early 2000s is when things were really taking off, and we're starting to see a lot more coverage of it. And I moved to Houston in '97. Met a buddy named Troy Brown, and Troy wanted to start his own draft publication. Troy and I kind of split that, and so for 4 years, 5 years, we basically traded, spending about 2 grand to publish a print guide that we stacked up in our garage. And at the time, that's when the arrow was pointing up for the internet and the arrow was pointing down for any kind of print product. And so after 5 years of that, or 4, I'm not sure, I figured out that maybe the business of the game is what might be more enticing to people. And I decided, by God's grace, I made a very fortuitous decision. Whereas most people were getting on the internet and trying to make money off clicks and off of banner ads and those kind of things, I hid all my stuff behind the wall, which was what we now know as premium content. And that idea took a long time to take hold because back then everyone thought, if I use my credit card to buy something on the internet, then some guy in a dark room in Chechnya is going to steal my identity. And by God's grace, 22 years, what is this? We started in '02, 23 years later, that everyone's got all their information all over the web, and everyone's got an Amazon website and a number of other subscriptions and things like that. So that was beneficial. But the core concept was we want to cover the game behind the game. We want to look at scouts, we want to look at agents, we want to look at a number of other people who are making the game go, but maybe not getting the same kind of publicity. And so we don't do mock drafts, we don't do player rankings. Anything that a hardcore football fan would find boring is kind of what we do. We don't, we try to serve markets that are underserved. And so that's kind of how we've gotten traction. And it took a little while for people to tune into that idea. But once they did, again, I had a little success. I mean, I'm certainly not rich or famous, but my wife doesn't ask me when I'm going to get a job anymore. You got it.
That's awesome. I guess first off, do you have any of those publications that you guys printed? Do you have any of those left over?
Yeah, the Smithsonian wasn't asking for those things. They're not really in high demand. They're around here somewhere. I'm sitting in my office right now as we record this. I'm not sure exactly where.
Sure, but you do have some of those remaining though.
They may be like holding up one edge of a table or something like that, or a bed. But I think if I looked hard enough, I could find them. It's definitely a little rough, but certainly different format and certainly a different content from what I do now. But it's still around here somewhere. I guess I've always thought it'd just be kind of cool to keep them just for posterity's sake, I guess.
Absolutely. So you started Inside the League in 2002, and obviously you're just kind of giving a little bit of background information there. In your bio, you mentioned you played briefly at Navy. Obviously, doing the draft publication, like how did this, you really, to me, didn't have any type of inside contacts of somebody who could, obviously back then, right? Like we didn't have all the social sites and we didn't have the notoriety and publicity. So I mean, what were those early years like of kind of getting this off the ground? Because honestly, when I started finding you, and again, it was probably years ago I found you, but really kind of following the newsletter in 21 or 22, I had assumed that maybe this was something that popped up in like the 2012, 13, something like that, until I went to your site and noticed like, oh, this is, like you said, 23 some years. So what were those early years like, kind of getting that off the ground?
Very lean, obviously, because again, the idea when we first started off, the idea was to try to capture the NFL agent market. And I remember when the idea for this came to me in the early 2000s, there were about 1,500 agents certified by the NFLPA. And I thought, if I can just carve off 10% of those guys and charge a decent price, I can do something with this. And I think within 2 years, maybe 3 years, the NFLPA came in and said, "We got way too many agents." And they instituted what's called the 3-year rule, which basically means you have 3 years to get someone on an NFL contract or you're out. And that cut the agent ranks from about 1,500 to about 7 or 800.
And what year did you say that happened?
I think that was '03 or '04,
Okay.
maybe even '05. Very, very soon after I launched ITL, and at that point, too late to turn back.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had to get a lot better at things. So when we launched on Labor Day of '02, I had done what I felt was a good amount of market research, and I thought I had reached out to enough agents who were on that list because every agent's cell and email was published on the NFLPA website, that there seemed to be a pretty good high demand for something like what I wanted to try to do, which was basically 4 features a week on the NFL agent business and how it's growing and where it's going and the issues they're facing and that kind of thing. And so I thought, my idea was, oh my gosh, I'm just afraid my server's gonna crash. Yeah, I thought we are gonna get so many subscriptions that first day that, we wouldn't be able to handle it, and on day 1, we got 2 subscribers, and on day 2, one of them wanted his money back. So that was my kind of introduction to the industry, and obviously a quite humble one. By God's grace, again, we have gained from that experience, but it did take a while to really figure it out. Initially, we were charging $250 for a 9-month subscriber cycle. We cut that after our first week, we had a sale and cut it back to $45 for a 9-month subscriber cycle. Still didn't get a lot of traction. It took a little while to really take hold and for people to get the idea of what we were. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I got hired to run the Hula Bowl in the summer of 2007, and I shuttered the website quite happily, actually. I was really excited to do that. I just felt like I was a little bit ahead of my time, and maybe I hadn't marketed correctly, and I was gonna run the Hula Bowl, forever and ever, amen. 6 months later, the Hula Bowl was over, and or at least went on hiatus, shall we say, because it's back now, but they didn't have a 2009 Hula Bowl, and so it was kinda back to the drawing board for me, and that's when I came back, and my wife urged me to go to a monthly subscription model, which was kinda what my earlier idea was, of $25 a month, whereas I had been charging 45 for 9 months, and to go all the way through the year, and that scared the hell out of me because I didn't know what I was gonna write about
Right.
from the last weekend in April to the first weekend in September. But we've overcome that, and although it started off slow, I restarted things slowly. As we moved into September, October, November, December, people began to come back. They began to accept the new price model, and I guess the rest is history. And again, it did take a while, and there was certainly a time when I thought that this was never going to be a viable model, but it was very, you know, try and fail, figure it out, and all those kind of things. Again, here we are 2 decades later. It's certainly for anyone who's considering doing something like this, it does require a lot of patience and a lot of stamina and a lot of, again, just trying things and figuring out what people want. It's certainly a very different model from what I initially thought, because when I first launched inside the league, my idea was I'm going to apply my journalism background. I'm going to root out all the bad guys. I'm going to make this an honest industry. I'm going to, save the world.
Yep.
And that's really, for a number of reasons, that was not a model that was going to work. But by God's grace, I was able to find one that did work. And so we've been able to last.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information, and I love that, in the 55 episodes we've done, we've maybe had one or two that I would say not rival you, but like had a little bit of an entrepreneurial business owner startup kind of background. But I think yours is really cool that, we're talking right early internet ages. And then as you bring up, you're going to run the hula bowl and you're just going to run it and that's going to be your jam. And then obviously that comes to a halt, which we can get into here in a second. But do you think taking that little hiatus, going to the hula bowl, unfortunately having that end, but do you think that that little break to bring you back was actually a healthy thing moving forward? Whereas if you would have just kept going, not to say you're hitting your head against the wall, but like having that break maybe helped you a little bit. Obviously, you said your wife gave you some good insight there too. But anything you think that with that little hiatus of stepping away before bringing it back, that you think that that helped you?
Well, it certainly expanded my Rolodex, so to speak. There were a lot it made a lot of contacts for me. It was the ultimate networking experience. There were a lot of negatives that came with it, but a lot of positives as well. And so when I came back, I think I had a slightly better idea of what people wanted, and I knew a lot more people, and they knew me. And so when I came back and kind of reintroduced it to the market, I think there's a lot more recognition of who I was and what I was trying to do rather than who is Neil Stratton? Why should I care what inside the league is? So I don't know that it didn't have application towards inside the league per se, except in a broad sense that I was able to, I guess, introduce myself to more people and then by extension inside the league. And so there were some benefits that came from that, but it was certainly a scary time when my original model I realized was not going to work. And I had this website and I had these things that I knew I could write about and these markets that I felt like needed served, but I really wasn't sure if that was going to sustain us as a family. And so it was difficult. And I also, at the time I was working at the Houston Chronicle as a sports department, walked away from that to take the hula bowl job and came back and didn't have that anymore. So I had to get back, to get that job. I wound up kind of more or less going back to where I had been to sustain me until I felt ITL could get off the ground, and wasn't sure how long that would take. And then March 24th of 2009, the they cut 40% of the workforce at the Chronicle, as newspapers were then beginning to really fail and not have the same traction they had had, and I was below the line when that happened. So I came home and told my wife, I'm unemployed again. And her reaction was, what are we going to do? And I didn't answer her, but I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to find out if Inside the League was going to have legs or not. And in a way, it was the best thing that could happen to me professionally because it was sink or swim time. And I had had enough, I didn't realize it at the time, but I'd had enough runway at that point to really have kind of tested ITL and learned what I needed to do and where I needed to go with it. And it basically meant now I really have to take it in that direction. We've been able to do that, with some measure of success.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the intro, after I kind of introduced you a little bit there, it's so cool. Like you said, you cover the boring side or what people who maybe aren't true like football junkies, right? Like they would consider it boring. And to me, like you have that pulse on the agent side, on the scouting side, on the GM side, like obviously, and we can talk about like what you do at Indianapolis with celebrating people on the NFL and, scouting side and propping people up and GMs and teams of the year and things like that. And it's stuff that like when I step back and look, it's like you literally created a community, right? Like you literally built this and people it's a spot for people to kind of gather around and it's really impressive that way. And obviously going back to the hula bowl, like you thought you're going to take that over, run with it. Obviously you have that 2007 to 2008 timeframe, and then after that it goes on hiatus. And for people that aren't aware, I mean the hula bowl was like it was the hula bowl and the East West Shrine game. I remember back in the day, watching it where those were the two games where, college, players went to play their all-star games and part of the discovery process to, have scouts see them before the draft and whatnot. Obviously, you know, what was it like putting in the work for that game, even though it was only one game? And then obviously you've kind of touched on what that was like, post that, but like in terms of building that game and everything you kind of did, what did you learn from that? And maybe how did that kind of help you with like connections and things like that moving forward to what you did after that 08 year getting back with inside the league?
Well, it was so educational, certainly in ways that I never dreamed it would be. I was exposed to a lot of things because I was really short staff. I basically was the staff. There wasn't we're used to now where you have these college all-star games and they've got 6, 7, sometimes a dozen scouting
Former scouts and
teams,
stuff, right? Yeah.
right, that kinda come and help during the process, and it was just me, and then I got to the island, and it was just me, more or less, not strictly speaking, we had a few people that helped and kinda in different ways, but for the most part, I was at the bottom of a giant funnel, and so you couldn't help but learn. So, during that season, I did a lot of my own scouting and evaluation. Shouldn't say scouting because 'cause I'm not an NFL scout, and I have a lot of respect for them, and I hate it when people call themselves scouts when they don't work for an NFL team. So, I will say I was an evaluator. I watched a lot of football, talked to a lot of scouts, met them, got to know them, hopefully won their trust. They certainly won mine. And so that part was obviously very educational. And then we got to the island and there were a number of stops and starts and a number of issues that kind of came along with that that are always part of any kind of big event. And again, I was kind of the one there having to answer a lot of questions, make a lot of decisions, all those kind of things. So I did grow from that as well. So there are a lot of things. And then kind of when you shutter something, when you end something and then you restart it, and you kind of have to go back around to people with hat in hand and say, we're going to try something new. And I hope you'll give us another shot. And that was educational as well, because we had, basically had lost all our momentum and we had to restart all that. So yeah, there were tremendous benefits that came from that whole experience. It's not something I'd want to go through again. I have been affiliated with a number of other all-star games, and it's a lot of fun to invite a player and give him that opportunity to get seen by teams that perhaps live his dreams. But now there's so many facets to it, and it's become such a different paradigm when it comes to all-star games that it would be a really different job now. I mean, we had, I think, 23 players drafted out of the Hula Bowl that year when it was the number 3 all-star game. It was the Senior Bowl, the Shrine, and the Hula. There's that is there's no way a number 3 all-star game is gonna have that many draftees now, given so many factors related to NIL and the way people see all-star games and juniors leaving early and all those kind of things. I mean, that's not even close to being a reality. So, but it was great to see all that stuff up close and again build a reputation in the business and to make a lot of friends that have remained friends to this day.
How many, this is kind of pivoting here a little bit. Obviously, like I said, I've been following your newsletter for the last 4 or 5 years. Comes out every Friday. The rep rumblings goes through again agent information, scouts who maybe are in or out of it. Really, a lot of great information. Again, if you're a true like football junkie and love seeing the backside of where guys are at, scouts who are out of it, right? What they miss, where they were, what they've been doing since then. It's again a very cool side to see the backside of things, like you were mentioning before. How many weeks straight have you had a newsletter going on that Friday? Do you know?
Oh
Like
boy.
how, like I mean, have you ever missed a Friday?
Since we launched, and then the newsletter is something people don't really talk to me about a lot, but it's funny because it's kind of what I've been come known for to some degree, especially within the industry. And it frustrates me to no end, given that I'm publishing 2 reports a day on a trade journal, a trade blog, that people say, "Oh, yeah, I subscribe to your newsletter." Well, number 1, there's no subscription to the newsletter is free. Everyone gets the newsletter. Number 2, there's a lot more inside the league than the newsletter, but listen, God bless them. If that's what people know us by, then that's great. And, I should know exactly how many years. I don't, Marcus. It's been, let's see, I remember that we kinda did a late 10th anniversary honeymoon in 2017, and I remember riding back in the back of a van after a day on a boat, sunburn, and having had a few beverages, and writing the Friday wrap on my phone over the course of maybe an hour ride back to the hotel. It was a much different form then, and certainly had a much smaller readership back then. It's become something that's something that I kinda work to all week now and requires a lot more horsepower and a lot more thought. But it's kinda cool to see how it has gained a little bit of momentum and how people know me by that. There are a lot of people, there are people that said, "You don't even realize it's Friday until I get your email hits my inbox at 7:30 PM." I don't know, I mean, people I celebrate on Fridays, so I don't know how, that's even possible, but it's become something fun to do, and it's got some pretty standard features that I think people really like, especially different areas of the industry, and it's a lot of work, and my wife always says, "When are you gonna end that stupid newsletter? It takes up all your time." I can't. It's become a pretty big deal and something that I kinda hang my hat on, but it takes about 8 hours to write on a Friday, and there's a lot there. It's like writing an 8 or 9-page paper. You start at, 9 o'clock in the morning, you gotta have it done by 5 o'clock in the evening. And so, it's a lot of work, and a lot of times, it takes a different form from what I thought it was going to, but I do think it's important now. It's an important part of ITL. It's kinda one of the legs of the stool when people think about what Inside the League is. So, it's kind of been fun to see it grow, and it's been a really good way of spreading the idea of what Inside the League is and helping people understand kind of what we talk about and what we do. And I don't think anyone else does exactly what we do when it comes to our newsletter. What we write about, again, it's a niche of the industry, but it I think our readership are the kind of people that I would hang around with, and people that be my friends, the people that kinda get me, because it's just about the game and the business and where it's going, and I think if you know where it's going, again, you can kinda tell the future, and you can adapt to it ahead of time and kind of be a little smarter about wherever your place is in the business.
Absolutely. And I think what makes it interesting, and I've tried doing some newsletters over the time, actually with this podcast, and that's why I give kudos to you, because to be consistent and never miss a Friday is again something to own it on. Not to mention you're doing 8 hours a day or 7 hours, whatever it ends up being, right? Where you really publish that. But I've noticed over the time too that you do it like you have those consistent themes that are going to be in there that people know that that's going to be in there. But also like even if I look back to April of 2022 or I look to April of 2025, even though it's draft season, you don't have the same exact format. It's not like you're just going back to that previous year and
Right.
here's the same jargon. Like it's always something different, which I think is very cool. Obviously you have, the podcast, you have the YouTube page, you have the books, which we'll get into in a second. You have a kind of the Succeed in Football, kind of your own second or your secondary blog that you kind of talk about in terms of getting into, the scouting world and things like that. But I guess what are all the services? And I know we could talk on this for probably days on end, but what are kind of a high level overview of all the different services that you guys offer inside the league?
Well, the core of ITL remains our posts on a daily basis. We're 5 days a week, we're posting something. We're not aggregators. I try to have something original that's written that goes directly to the industry. This time of year, especially with the coach carousel going, we're talking about which search firms are working with them, which agencies represent the coaches getting fired, which ones represent the ones that are coming in. There is still a little bit of movement on the scouting side, not nearly as much, and we try to track that a bit. But especially after this week and maybe, moving into December, we'll start really heavily tracking who's signing with whom, which All-Star game draft eligible players are going to, where they're training. And that sounds like, again, something that's hopelessly boring to people who are not part of the industry, but for people who are part of the industry, it's really critical information, the kind of stuff that they can't find anywhere else. As we move into January, I hit all the major All-Star games, and there are 6 that I would call major that are actually covered by NFL scouts and that will have players that will be in camps, come April and May. And so we track all those and we talk about who's going where and we track which agent signed each one of the players for those games and we talk about what's going on during the course of them. And then obviously the combine. And we started, I think it was 17 years ago, 2010. I guess that's 16, having a seminar at the combine. The reason why I started it was, Marcus, and I don't know if you've ever been to the combine or how many times you've been.
I need to go. I've wanted to go last few years. At some point, I just got to go.
It's a unique event because people think, "Oh, wow, I'm gonna go, I'm just gonna hang out with all these football people." Well, Indianapolis is a perfect place for the event in one sense because once you get downtown, you don't have to go driving out to suburbs to hit places or whatever. You don't even need a rental car. But the other side of that is if you don't have a badge in Indianapolis, you can really get bored and alone because you're not going to get entry into the key events that are taking place. And so that's why in 2010 I had an event and we had it in the basement of a hotel and tried to make it a kind of a learning thing But my idea was to give people something that they could come to where they could feel like they had something that someplace they could go to be among others who were in a similar station of the football industry. And as that's grown, we've turned it into more of an awards presentation. I call the Academy Awards of Scouting. And we have 30 plus awards that we give out, and it's become a pretty big deal for us. But it's still free. And anyone that wants to come can come and be part of it. We even have an open bar afterwards that everyone's welcome to come to. And we just want it to be something where people can come and feel like they're part of the industry and part of the crowd and have somewhere to go. I mean, one of the real appeals of the Senior Bowl, especially in the old days, was you could go and you're if you went to the mezzanine level of the, Adams Mark, you could be right there with Mike Tomlin and Bill Belichick and any other coaches that were there, the GMs, the head coaches, the scouts. That's not true anymore, but I wanted to kinda recapture that in Indianapolis, and so we had that event on Wednesday nights. Now over the course of the last 5, 6 years, we've also developed an event that's on Friday mornings, which appeals more to the NIL, transfer portal, college personnel space, which is obviously an exploding one and really growing. And we had about 300 people for that event last year. And that one does require registration and payment, but I feel a really, really good off-season networking event where people can come and meet people that can help them if they're trying to move into that space. That space is just exploding because, as you know, Marcus, there's no registration required to be an NIL agent. There's no registration required to represent someone to help them meet people from schools and perhaps be recruited and perhaps get a contract and all those kind of things. And so, because it's so hard to wrap your arms around, and there's no listing of NIL agents anywhere, you got to get people in a room and they've got to meet people and actually shake hands and trade cell phone numbers and all those kind of things. And so, that's kind of the idea there. Last year, we had two panels of P4 GMs to answer questions and talk about the topics that really matter. And we don't bring the media in. We want transparency. We want candor. We
So is
want
that, not to cut you off, is that a room with, obviously you said P4, is that college people and agents, or just the college people getting educated on it?
college people and agents. We want it to be the crossroads of the business. We want people to come in and feel comfortable and know that they're among other people who are maybe pulling on a different end of the rope, but all pulling on the same rope. The idea is to get players into the best situations and improve football teams and build rosters.
I'm assuming that's gotta be one of one? I mean, there's not any
Well,
other, right? I mean,
well, the there was an event in Nashville this summer, and it's called the Personnel Symposium.
yep.
It's a 3-day affair, and I think it's a lot more geared towards working in college, and it's a lot more in the weeds as far as the vagaries of running a college football team. Ours is a bit more geared toward player representation as it relates to those people. And so it is a little different. It's certainly shorter than what took place this summer, but I think is with as it relates to that industry, I think what we have at the combine and what they have in Nashville are really the only two that kind of play to that market. And so we're trying to grow that, and I think we will. We started off having one room and hoping we'd have about 75 people. We want to have about 300 people and having to expand to 2 rooms, and it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work getting it put together. This year, we're gonna have an awards component to it as well. We haven't really completely defined how that's gonna be, but we're kinda putting the finishing touches on that. But again, even though the Friday event is something you gotta pay for, we don't turn away anyone. If you wanna come, you're welcome to come. And then, we have a big dinner on Thursday night as well for the guests, and so we're trying to make it into kind of a 3-day affair, and I think we're having some success with that. It's just kinda putting one foot in front of the other. But at the end of the day, I just want people to come and feel like they're a part of things and feel included. And if you're in the industry, I want you to, and you're relevant. This is a very small world when it comes to player representation and player evaluation and all those kind of things. And a very I think undersung one, a critical one, but a place where there's not a lot of light shown necessarily. And I hope that that's kind of our role is to try to bring more attention to those people, maybe help them get the credit they deserve. And if we can accomplish that, then I feel I'll feel like we have done something.
Yeah, I love that connectivity piece that, I mean, seems to be always around you, right? Like it's always like doing something. And like you said, a lot of these events, whether it's the symposium that you're doing for the NFL guys and the scouting guys, and just it's free, right? Like we're just recognizing people and giving them a platform. I do agree with you on Indy. I've been to the Final Four there. I've been to a recruiting event when I was still coaching in college that was held down there. And I mean, Mike Krzyzewski said many times about how Indy should host every Final Four because there's not a better venue where all the bars and restaurants and then Lucas Oil and everything is just right there. And I didn't know until reading an article this last year about the combine, how there's tunnels actually that connect in certain areas for medical things. And, which was kind of very interesting that I never knew about. Going back to your search firm comment, which maybe I'm just really ignorant on. I didn't know that that was prevalent, in the NFL industry. Is that big? I mean, is every team, and I know every team is a huge blanket, but I mean, are most organizations when they're going to make a hire, are they using a firm of some point to come in there and give background intel or helping, get more information on that candidate or who's out there?
I think it is growing on the NFL side. On the college side, it's grown. It's already there. And if you're a P4 school, more often than not, you're going to bring someone in, it if nothing else, to kind of do the background and the vetting of the coaches, even if they're not necessarily handing you a list of here's who you should hire. But the powerful agents in the industry have grown to really connect with those search firms. And so there is so much of a behind the scenes when it comes to hiring coaches and identifying the coaches that might be hired, and obviously the buyouts and the numbers and all those kind of things. And it's fascinating and it is totally hidden. And it's really hard to get access to those halls of power, if you will. And I'm trying to do the best that I can. The difficulty is there's not a lot of people out there that are kind of covering this, and it's a very quid pro quo industry. If you don't have something to offer, then why should they give you the information? And there's a lot of egos involved. So, if I'm a search firm, I don't know that I necessarily want it out that I was hired, because if the hire blows up, then that kind of comes back on me. So it's a very kind of high wire type thing, but it's fascinating because that's where the industry is moving. I read a book about a year ago. I literally was at the combine last year, and I'm sitting at a table at St. Elmo's with several people from the college football space, and they're talking about this book. And I was so intrigued that my wife, who's at the table with me, ordered it from the table. And I got home 2 days later, ready to decompress. And so, like, over about a 48-hour, 72-hour period, I read this book. It's called The Price. And it's really good. But the part that's interesting about it is it really kind of unlock the numbers and the amount of business that's getting done and the potential here. And this is before, I think, before the first private equity firm had kind of danced with any of the power conferences or any of the teams. And so many things are happening now. I mean, the amount of money, it's like a nuclear bomb of how much is taking place in this industry, and how much money is changing hands. And there's just so much of it out there people don't even recognize, even though people lament that college football has become all about money. They have no idea how much it's about to become about money if it stays on the current track. And so, as someone whose business is kind of hinged to all that stuff, I've got to really be ahead of the curve, and I really got to know where all that's going. So I don't even know exactly what point I was trying to make, but I will say there's just so many things, so many aspects of the game that if you're just focused on who you should draft for your fantasy team or who your favorite team should take in the first round, you're missing a lot of it. And I think that's what's kind of fun about it. But anyway, so anyway, we have tried to leverage a lot of that at the combine, while at the same time trying to give people a place to go and a place to be part of things if they don't necessarily have that. And again, hopefully we've accomplished that, but we're trying to get better at it every year.
No doubt. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously I'm well aware of the search firms at the college level, but it's interesting to me how, obviously it seems like every rare do you see an athletic director that comes out and says that they're making the hire, they're not using a firm, whether it's college basketball, hoops, baseball, whatever it is. But it's also interesting how prevalent those search firms are on campus on the academic side as well, too.
Yeah.
Where they have the academic arm, and obviously it's really interesting, on how that all works. Well, obviously you've written 3 books, and I didn't even know until I was, researching about obviously having you on here about the Moving the Chains book. because I knew about Value Picks, which you just wrote, Scout Speak, which I had bought and written or bought and read a while back. And honestly, a great book, like I said, from the college coaching perspective, because to me, it's like it applies to the recruiting side because it's so similar in terms of what people are doing, the background. I remember, which was a really interesting nugget, was one of your first ones you put in there about how tight scouts are from other teams. You know, that you would think on the outside, you're like, well, that guy's not giving any information there, and that guy's not giving any information there. But when you see each other at the college campuses, at the games, at the wherever, and you know that guy's going to move ahead of the ladder, you're like, well, hey, I want to get in with this guy, so he brings me along when he gets a better position. I guess going back to what we were just kind of talking about with NIL and everything in the book, you talk about weighing character. How much? And I think I asked this to Roderick David actually when Roderick was on here. How much do you think the amount of money that certain people are getting, not all of them, but how that's changed in terms of weighing like, okay, if I bring this guy in and he's actually going to make less as a rookie compared to maybe what he was just getting, how am I going to know that his mental state is still going to be hungry enough to work for this, but then also the next second contract? Like, how do you think teams are looking at that? Or do you think like it's like, if you're wired at a young age the right way, like this isn't really going to change you?
It's a critical question, and I think it's one that everyone is chewing on. I was a week ago, was it this last week? I was sitting in the office of a major P4 school, the director of scouting, and he was discussing how we're trying to find someone that will come in and write an algorithm for a program we can use to interview these players so that we can find out just what you're describing. Are they going to remain motivated? And the problem he was having was there are a lot of services out there doing that, but they're sharing information. They want theirs to remain strictly proprietary because because if you can crack that code, you've got something special.
Right.
And that's true on the NFL side as well. I mean, there's so many different services out there that do nothing but evaluate players mentally. We do interview prep, and I think it was we've been doing it for about 10 years. We had Ray Farmer come in and do our interview prep one year after the Browns had let him go. And he had a guy named Decker that he felt so strongly about that he insisted that if he went somewhere to do interview prep, he was going to bring him with him on his own dime. And now I think Decker, I can't remember what his first name is, but his background was in the
That
military.
was the guy. Was he with the Colts at one time too?
Correct, with
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Colts, and I think he's with the Panthers now. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know he's with the Panthers for a while. I'm not sure where he is now. I know he's in the league now, but he had a military background, and his whole thing was, let's find out the guys are going to quit before they quit. Let's find out the guys that are going to accomplish the mission no matter what it takes, even if that means they're risking their own lives. I think more and more people are trying to figure that kind of stuff out because you see it all the time. A guy signs his second deal in the NFL, and that soft tissue injury he may have played through, man, he's gonna miss 4 or 5 games because of that now. He's gonna react to things differently. It's all about the mental, and that's such an important part of it, and I don't know that we'll ever really be able to diagnose just exactly how a player's going to look at a situation in advance, but I can tell you this, a lot of people are trying to figure it out and hoping they can.
Yeah, no doubt. And read an article the one time when Decker was with the Colts and Ballard, and how they, talked about his military background and the questions he was asking. And yeah, and like you said, you hit it spot on the head, right? Like there's people out there. Ironically, I actually connected with somebody on LinkedIn the other day who's actually in that space, which was interesting to me because again, I always think about it from the basketball recruiting lens. It's no different bringing a high school kid in, right? You want to see what their mental makeup is, and how they're going to work out. But yeah, if you're a company, great, we can do this for you and we can do it at a high level. But we also want to get in with everybody where you're like on the opposite side, whether it's a college team, an NFL team, whoever's trying to crack the code, they're like, well, no, we want to keep this in house here and have that competitive advantage. So yeah, really interesting topic. I mean, I guess in terms of writing those, 3 books, and again, I know there was a variety of different things. Value Picks was more focused on the one draft, if I'm not mistaken.
Value picks on the 2016 draft. It was a really fascinating draft. Laramie Tunzel, I think, was kind of aware. People kind of remember where they were when they saw the video. And my initial idea was to write a book just about that. And as I started to kind of peel back the layers, there were a lot of really interesting stories in that draft. The players are kind of overlooked for a number of different reasons. I mean, from anywhere from Derrick Henry to Michael Thomas to a number of other players that were part of that draft, Tyreek Hill. Dak Prescott. We're all part of that draft. A lot of those guys went a lot later than you would have thought, given their prowess that they've shown in their careers, and there are reasons for that. And I think if you read the book, it's just kind of I'm a big believer in traditional scouting and player evaluation, and I think what you find out is most of the time, even though this guy slid, there are reasons why, and scouts will kind of see those things. And even though they've been successes, there's the dings that scouts had on them have manifested themselves in their NFL careers. So more often than not, I think scouts know things. It's just you don't necessarily know maybe how much value you should put on that character issue or that injury that they had or that inability to do this or do that. And so I guess we'll never know for sure exactly how to weight all those things. And that's kind of what makes the whole scouting process fun. Some people get it right sometimes, some people don't get it right other times, but there's no one who's getting it right every single time. And even the guy who's sitting on Twitter watching his own film, and thinks he's smarter than everybody else, every once in a while he will look like he is, but 9 out of 10 times he's not, or over the length of time, if you've really, especially if you've got skin in the game, you find out you don't know nearly as much as you thought you did.
It's funny how all those wrong takes get deleted somehow on the Twitter servers. I didn't know if I was gonna be the first one to bring up draft Twitter or you were, but you get the golden bell for that one. So in terms of writing those books, what did you learn in writing them? I mean, the process in terms of putting those things together, was one easier to write than the other? Between those three books, I mean, what did you kind of learn through that process?
Well, the first book, Moving the Chains, is really kind of a guide specifically written for parents of players that are trying to figure out how what kind of representation they should choose for their sons, what kind of training they should choose, all those kind of things. I'll admit it's a little dated. I think the book's 8 years old now. The way that players choose their agents now, the fact that they don't have to wait until they're done anymore to choose agents obviously changes the game significantly, no pun intended. But there's still some things that I think are relevant that are part of that book. That was basically a newsletter series that I had written for players and their parents, and I just kinda compiled it and put it in a book form, and that was really easy to spit out because it was already kind of pre-written. I
Sure.
had to make a few changes, but for the most part, that's all it was. The second book, Scout Speak, it was 2020, spring of, we're all bored sitting. I don't like to watch TV, and so I had to do something, and so I have all these different events, and whatever I do, I always record them. And so I had all these transcriptions of stuff, and I didn't know what I was gonna do with them. So I thought, there's a lot of good stories in here. There's a lot I think that people don't understand about the industry. Why don't I try to put all this together and kind of knit it all together in a way, put some really good stories in there. Some are funny, some are interesting, whatever, and put that out as a book. And so I did. And so that was my second book. The third one I already kind of talked about. Initially the idea was to write about the Tunsil experience because it kind of brought everyone in the industry. I mean, NFL scouts were watching this for the first time, just like everyone who aspired to be a scout, or everyone who loved the game, loved the draft or whatever. I mean, it was a real time event. But as I started to write about it, there were some other directions I wanted to go, and so we wound up doing that. And the one of the most interesting parts I thought about that book, I got to where I needed more. I need to put more content in, and so I called up several friends who had been scouts during that year, and I just said, "Hey, listen, tell me about why y'all drafted who you did." And so there are 7 or 8 accounts of the draft from different scouts who were with different teams, and they gave me their take on the players that we focused on. But they also just said, "Hey, we like this guy for this reason. We wound up taking this guy, man. We wanted to take this other guy." This guy was gonna be we were gonna take this guy in the draft, but he had a lousy pro day, and so we wouldn't touch him anymore. There are a couple hilarious stories about guys that in how they turn out to be in the locker room and all those kind of things. I mean, I still laugh about them thinking about it, but it's fascinating because I write what I call airport books. But you get on a 2-hour flight, you can pretty much read it cover to cover. But I think the stories in there are what you really kind of take away from them because that's the cool stuff. You're thinking about a player that you thought you knew, and you find out his backstory and how teams really thought about him. To me, that's insight that I couldn't find anywhere else, and it was so fun to learn that kind of stuff when I was writing it. So it was a lot of fun to put together. The thing about the third book is The first one was more or less a compilation of a newsletter. The second was more of a compilation of different events that I had hosted. The third one was the first one that I wrote start to finish on my own. I mean, there's obviously a lot of quotes in there, but that's all writing and narrative and all those kind of things. So it was a lot harder to write, but it was probably more fun to write too. I've got ideas on my next book's going to be. I haven't gotten that far yet. I've got so many balls in the air right now. I can't even think about writing anything. I am looking forward to them. I mean, we don't sell many copies of them, but it's still kind of cool to have them. I always wondered if I would actually write a book, and so having written 3, I can't believe it. And I'm looking forward to my 4th. And not, I mean, again, altogether, we've maybe sold 400, maybe 500 copies total. Haven't scratched the surface, but it's still kind of fun to put them together and to be able to see your name on the byline of a book. So there'll be another one coming out. I'm not sure when that'll be. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be about, but it's on the way. It's all right here right now.
I was going to ask if Neil Stratton, growing up in West Virginia in the '90s, would have been proud of or surprised that he was going to write 3, now possibly 4 books down the road. So, were you a Mountaineer fan growing up?
Well, my story is kind of weird. I was born in South Louisiana, and we lived there till I was in 4th grade. We moved to West Virginia for a year and a half, then to Puerto Rico for 2.5, and back to West Virginia. So I'm not a guy that spent all my life in West
Yeah,
Virginia. I still claim it. But as far as being that kind of guy, no. And then I graduated from Marshall. You can't really go to Marshall and be a Mountaineer fan. Obviously, those are kind of the two tentpole schools, if you will, in the state. Uh, I mean, I'm certainly proud of the West Virginia when they win, but there's also a degree of Army Navy to it. You both kinda have that in common, but you also, you root like hell against them when you're playing them, and there's a part of you that doesn't want them to succeed even though you're kind of brothers in arms.
yeah,
So, yeah, I do I love to see him win, but I love to see Marshall win even more.
yeah. The Chad Pennington, Randy Moss days were those were the days.
Crazy. I mean, crazy that those guys came out of that program, and you look at it now and those guys would never ever be there, but it's exciting that they were, and, boy, what players they turned out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess last question before I let you go here. Appreciate you again taking some time to talk about your story here. Um, is it in all of your conversations you've had with people? Do you think it's the same or different in terms of getting in the industry? Do you think it's still the same thing that if you want to get into scouting, you're this college kid who's maybe helping a college program or whatever, a guy that aspires to be an NFL scout someday? Do you think it's still the same thing of you're going to have to volunteer, you're going to have to get as many experiences as possible, you're going to have to, sleep on the air mattress and really grind and just take on every experience possible? Do you think any of that's changed, or is there different things now with the technology and connections and events and ways to, maybe connect with somebody?
Well, I think in a sense, it has changed and probably for the better, but I think ultimately when it comes to scouting, you've gotta make up your mind that you won't be denied. I was visiting with 3 different teams 2 weeks ago in their college personnel departments, and all of them said, "We spend a lot of our time cycling through LinkedIn trying to find people that call themselves devout scouting enthusiasts, and we pitch them to come in, volunteer with our program, find a part-time job somewhere, work with us for a couple years, and hopefully we can either hire them or get them hired somewhere else." That's a big investment of time and everything else, blood, sweat, and tears. I think you have to do that. And so many people think they want to get into scouting, but they're not really sure if they want to pay the price. You got to make sure you want to pay that price, because the thing about scouting is you can't go out and get a certificate from someone or some kind of online whatever. You've got to go out and build relationships and get in front of people and prove to them and win a champion, have someone that is willing to go to bat for you, or you'll never get a job in this industry. So that's tough. When it comes to player representation, I think there's never been a better time, because if you are not certain you want to get NFLPA certified and maybe don't have the money, you can go out and be an NIL agent. And if you apply yourself and recruit successfully and start to build a network, you can really make some money there rather quickly with minimal investment, other than your time, which is a big investment, but financial investment, not as much. And so I think these are good times to be both of them, but you've got to make up your mind that that's what you want to do, because if you're half in, you won't have success and you'll waste a lot of time that you probably should be applying elsewhere.
No, I love that. And obviously, inside the league has not been a half in thing. I mean, you've been devoted to this thing for quite a while. Again, I'm gonna have to get the value picks book and look back at that 2016 draft. But yeah, I appreciate you again sitting down, taking the time. Follow Inside the League on Twitter, Scouting the League. You have your podcast, Inside the League on YouTube. Anything else where people can find you, or if there's people that are just diehard football junkies looking to see the backstory of things, is there anything else that you have out there?
Well, our our blog is Succeed in Football, and I know blogs are a little passe in 2025, but there's still a lot. It's still a place where I can kind of put my personal thoughts about the business, and we do a lot of that's aimed towards helping people break into the industry. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of people out there that are sharing those thoughts, especially as they evolve. We've had that blog for more than 10 years. And I think there's been a lot of nuggets, or at least I've tried to put out a lot of nuggets about breaking into the game, being more realistic about your place in the game, knowing how to take advantage of different situations. And that's not all I write about there, but it is writing kind of on a different level and takes on more of a advisory, counseling kind of, approach
Li- like a
sometimes.
mentorship thing almost in some ways, right? I mean,
That's the idea.
you've had people like Blake Benningfield, and you've had different speakers on those things. I know I've noticed and whatnot over time. So I think it's kind of interesting that way, that it's almost, yeah, it's kind of like a mentorship way. What I see, way I see it.
Well, I get people emailing me all the time and saying, "What do I need to do to get into scouting?" Usually, I'll send them a couple links from my blog, because I've already addressed their questions, and I guess it's more economical that way. Anyway, yeah, lots of content out there, lots of ways to read what I write, what we write, and hopefully pretty easy to find, and hopefully pretty relevant to people that are trying to find their way in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Neil, appreciate you taking some time on this Tuesday night, pre-Thanksgiving here. Enjoy some Thanksgiving with the family, some Thanksgiving football, and obviously, hopefully for us people here in Wisconsin, a Packers win. So, yeah, thanks for joining tonight.
My pleasure, Marcus. Thanks for having me on, buddy. Happy Thanksgiving.